Honest community, before we dive into this episode, we've got a quick free favour to ask. If you enjoy the Honest Property podcast, please hit like, follow and subscribe wherever you're listening from. It helps us grow, reach more people and bring on guests that you want to hear from. Thanks for being a part of this. We appreciate you more than you know.
Hello and welcome to the Honest Property Podcast. We're your hosts, Becky and Ruth, and we love talking all things holistic entrepreneurship and being modern property investors. And on this episode, we have switched the tables because we have Sherisse Bisram. We were on her episode, I swear, the other day. So it's our honor to have her on our podcast instead. Welcome,
Yay.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We love everything about you. Basically, like the color of your branding in general, but also just like everything that you ooze is very like feminine and very empowering, which is definitely something that's needed in the space.
Oh, thank you. No, I really appreciate that. And the feeling is very mutual. I also love your both of your energy and how you feed off of each other. It's just so honest and real. It's what we need in the world.
But we just want to know, like, how did you get, because we know that you're a dancer. So how did it come about that you started your business? What's dancing, the evolution? Yeah, the evolution of how from beginning to where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's I would love to say it's a beautiful tale, but it's more of like a walk in the trenches of the valley of the shadow of death. But I'll take you there. And I think actually my story very much is, I like to say, it's alchemy. So how I've been able to turn pain to power, or to liquid gold, in other words. So I guess if I go all the way back, I grew up in a volatile household. So one of my parents was an addict and the other one was always working to compensate, obviously, for the other one being in and out of work. And about 6 years old, I just remember like the real abusive arguments happening in the household. And I remember putting the music on, so my sister didn't pay much attention to it. And I just had a conversation with myself and I was like, I'm never going to let anyone treat me like this. I'm never going to allow myself to go through these things again. And that was really my first layer of armor that I decided to put on, and I stepped into that role of being the protector. So in my house this was happening all the time. And also I think being the oldest, and also
the oldest.
Yeah, being the oldest, only by 11 months, but very much the older sibling for sure. Like in terms of like everything I am, my sister always says now, she's like, yeah, she always used to say, oh, we're not that much difference. And now she's like, yep, you very much are the older sister and you always have been. But yeah, I guess that sort of dealing with some of addiction as well. There's obviously physical abuse, there's mental abuse, there's all of the other things that come with that. And then obviously what we touched on in our episode is the fact that obviously I grew up in an area that wasn't culturally diverse. So I remember walking home from school and like adults would pull over and shout out racist things and tell you to go back to your own country and all sorts of stuff. So I feel like as a young girl, I was really met with a divide in, did I want to accept this narrative that had been placed on me to be, you know, the person that is the victim of these situations? Or did I want to break a cycle that was placed in front of me? And even at that young age, I knew and felt, like the conversation I had when I was 6 years old, that I didn't want anyone else to go through this feeling. And so when those adults would shout at me, I would shout back. And I would be like, how about you go back to where you came from? I live here, you know, or whatever it was, you know, to make light of the situation. But I think the thing is, a lot of people say to me about resilience. They're like, oh, I'm so resilient. I went through this and this. And I'm like, I have had to be resilient. I had no other choice, you know. So when you're talking about bouncing back from not getting the job, or, you know, I don't know, coming out of a relationship going into the next one, you know, like there's levels to that. And I think for me, it wasn't a choice, it was survival. Just within that cycle, I was gaining this strength that was quite toxic, and also an exterior, not really how I felt internally. Because what happens is, when we start to build up these layers of armor and these protective mechanisms, is that for me, I was then bottling up how I actually felt. So all of my own feelings were being masked and hidden because I was worried about everyone else. So I was always concerned about my friends and my family, and I was there for everyone all of the time, to the point where I didn't cry for like 20 years in front of anyone. But along with this sort of process that was happening between the ages of 12 to 17, I had 11 members of my family that passed away just back to back over different things, illnesses, addiction. Obviously, my parent passed away in the end, and people are always like, oh my God, that's so hard. And I'm like, the hardest part for me was really the living through it. You know, prior to the death, I think grief is something that is something you have to learn to live with, whereas living with people that aren't caring for you how they should, that's a very hard thing. But you know, I also in that time when I had a lot of death wasn't allowing myself to grieve. Again, everyone else's feelings and emotions were my priority. I didn't want anyone else to feel sad, so then I didn't outwardly feel sad, so then no one knew that I was sad. It was quite a toxic cycle, as I always say. And again, that everyone always tells you at a funeral, be strong for your family. So I took that literally, and again, putting more layers of armor on all of the time. And then in between all of this, my real outlet was the dancing. So that was a space where I could go and just release and feel seen. And I had lots of different groups of friends. There was people talking to me all of the time. And I guess it just was escapism from how I was really, truly feeling. And that was probably my only bit of feminine energy, was when I was actually dancing, because everything else is so masculine, right? But there was so much, always so many layers to everything in my life. Like even when I went to like dance school, college and university, there was always hardships, you know, like I always had to work extra hard. And again, the colorism that came into it, because in all of the places that I studied, there was never really many people of color. And in the dance industry in particular, like I'd walk into rooms of like 500 girls that were like all white, and I'd be like the only brown girl in the room, and then they'd say it's a height thing as to why we got cut, and I was like, is it? You know, and even down to like my body shape, being South American, I'm naturally curvy. And I remember one agent said to me, if you just lost your curves, you'd be the perfect dancer. And I was like, can't really do anything about that. Even if I lost loads of weight, the curve is still going to be there, you know. And again, I have a choice. Do I want to keep this victim mentality of being like, oh, everything's against me, or I went the opposite way, which again wasn't healthy, which was, I will show you, I will prove to you that I can do this. And that was really my driving force. So, you know, the whole way through my 20s and my teens, I was in this real mission to prove to people I can be successful. And all of the obstacles I was facing, like I had so many troubles at university. I mean, financially, I had to work 4 different jobs because student loan didn't pay out. And then I kept that mentality of working really hard because, again, I wanted to be able to do nice things for my friends and family. So I was just working myself to the bone. And I always like to say that addiction, whether it be drugs, alcohol, we shame it in society, but actually we're all addicted to something, and mine was the hard work, right? And I think that was really my biggest piece of forgiveness when I looked at my life's journey. And the work that I teach now is obviously that we have to forgive these parts of ourselves, because we have to understand and accept what's happened to us. So when I made that correlation, I was like, there was so much more peace that came from that space. But obviously that didn't come until really and truly, I think when I got to 23, I'd been on a couple of dance jobs where the manager had tried to sleep with some of the girls. And again, I was like, right, not having that. That's not it. I'm out. You know, if you want to stay and participate in that, that's up to you. That's not how I roll. I came back and I thought, again, throughout my journey, I've never fit into a box. We spoke about this, like whether it be identity, whether it be my actual dance style, how I dance naturally doesn't really tend to fit into a box. And I was kind of trying to live my life the way I thought it was supposed to go. And then when I came back from those jobs, I was like, what do I actually want to do? And my real core passion was like street dance, hip hop, that type of thing. So when I got to like get into that world, that was when things started to move in the right direction. I was like, yes, I'm doing the thing. But again, my mindset was always in survival mode and proving that even in the great jobs I was doing, I still felt empty, or like I was running from or towards something. And I did, in 2019, I was one of the dancers in the Marvel movie, The Eternals. And that is like the big job, you know, that was the one that I dreamt of my whole life. I've been a Marvel fan since I was a little girl. And when I was there, it just felt like, hours of filming. Do I want to be doing this, you know? So that really was the kind of like little feeling in me of something wasn't right. And then roll on 2020, and I was planning to move to LA. That was all sorted, that I was going to meet with the attorneys and become a dancer out there, because that was everything I wanted to do. I set for myself at 18. And then when the pandemic hit, I met this wall in front of me and I ran into it full steam ahead, and then sort of the armor around me shattered, and I had to face my real self in that time. And that's really where the lid of Pandora's box opened, and I really felt all the feelings that I'd been running from for the past 28 years of my life. So that really was the awakening moment for me. Not only that, I hit my Saturn return, so that was all of like the astrology that makes sense of why actually I was going through all of that stuff. But it was really, that was the moment when time stopped. I took the mask off, I took the layers off, and I was like, who is Sherisse Bisram under being a dancer, a choreographer, the go-to friend, the person that's there for everyone, the strong woman, the warrior, you know, like taking all of those layers off and actually finding out who I was. And that was just a journey in itself. But I feel like I'm going to stop there, and then you can ask me some questions and then I'll carry on if you need me to.
I just want to say, like, you're amazing. This journey you've been on has been, it's like everyone's got their own version, especially when it comes to their Saturn returns. And I can relate very much being like an eldest child. And there's a lot of similarities, but obviously your story is, I can so see how strong your armor had to be for the things that you've been through. And how it's shaped you, who you are. But the self-awareness, that's what's really amazing, that you've reached a point and you were like, I'm going to just delve into finding out who I am, what it is I want, and how I don't need, it's like a realization that you're acknowledging you don't need, you can figure out your path where you're not having to please other people, essentially.
And also to say as well, like, we definitely felt, I feel like the pandemic was obviously awful, but at the same time, we've always said it was a bit of a blessing, because
we were all everyone needed, wasn't it?
Especially if you're an entrepreneur, like, it definitely was a brick wall for us, because we were, I would say, marginally workaholics. With the whole, like, that's what I could see the similarities. We were constantly trying to prove ourselves. And then it got to COVID, and it was the first time, like, I had to walk around marching around because I needed to get this energy out. But it was having to face going, oh, what is it that you really want from life? I think is so hard if you're in a state of that survival mentality, or if you've grown up around that environment of survival mentality. So, like, obviously we come from different, everyone comes from different walks of life, but that if the energy of, I guess, the family unit or yourself has a high level of survival in your decision making, it can really stop you from being able to see what you personally need, and others it feels like it's selfish.
Can I ask a question about the dancing? Because I'm a dancer as well, and I would go to it to escape. And I know it's like, it's good for your mind and it's good for your body, but I felt like sometimes I would go to it and the escapism wasn't healthy because it wasn't really addressing the issue. Did you ever feel like that for yourself?
Yeah, for sure. And actually, I feel like it was, again, proving, you know, like when you're in the room, and especially being like a trained dancer, having all these years of experience as a professional, when I used to go into rooms, like in dance classes, I would feel like I had to prove myself again in there. Like I don't feel like I could just let free and just like move around. You know, like if you go into like a static dance or like something like that, you just get to be free and you close your eyes. If you do a cacao ceremony or something, it's so much different. Whereas going into a choreographed class and you've got to step in and then naturally standing out. But when I dance in those spaces, I know everyone's watching me. So then it creates this other like layer of like, oh, okay, so I've got to perform now. Do you know what I mean? I can't just be. And that's another reason why now I haven't really been dancing in like going to classes myself anymore, which I used to love, because I'm not that version of me anymore. And I know that that would bring some old stuff up that I just don't want to, not that I'm running from, because I feel like I've put that to rest now, and I don't need to do that. You know, like I don't need to be in those rooms. I don't need to prove myself. I don't need to be the best dancer in the room. And so it's not worth like, yeah, reliving old things for no purpose other than to just go through the sort of pain of doing that, you know? Not that it is
You
painful,
feel
but
like everything from
unnecessary.
what you're saying, like I really believe in you go through seasons of your life, and that
Yes,
so the dancing for you was that season and it served its purpose, and now you have
absolutely.
other tools in your box that allows you to not escape, or maybe addresses things in a
Mm.
healthier way.
Hey guys, if you're new to property investing, we know exactly how hard it is to figure out where to start. That's why we created the Beginner's Roadmap. It's your guide to mastering the fundamentals so that you can move forward with clarity and confidence. Plus, you'll gain access to our free community for ongoing support. Just hit the link in the show notes. Now, let's jump back into this episode.
Yes.
Pick up from what happened after COVID. Like, what tools did you find?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is where it gets the wildness. And I said to someone earlier today, it was like the valley of the shadow of death. It was literally that. It was like dark night of the soul. Yes. And I feel like, you know, like a really important thing to say on this is that there's been moments in my life where I have got to a point where I've been so low emotionally that I didn't want to be here anymore. Like I couldn't carry the weight of everything that I was carrying for everyone else's emotions and then my own that I was trying to keep together. And I just got to a point where I could have just driven into a wall, you know, like that was how I was so overwhelmed with everything. So I know I'd been in dark points in my life, and, you know, it was a blessing and a curse of like everything that's happened in my life, because I'd lost so many people that I didn't want to put my family through that again. And I knew escaping wasn't the answer for me. So when these feelings came up, it was so different to that experience. Like that was a real lowness that I'd felt in my life. Obviously, that's the, you know, almost rock bottom. But this was, imagine you kind of fall so far down the bottom of a well, and everything around you is your old childhood experiences, and each thing represents a memory of something that happened that wasn't fun, you know. And it's almost like you're trying to climb up to the top, and as you climb up and you get to a higher point, something grabs your leg from underneath you and pulls you back down again. And it was like this constant journey of managing my emotions and figuring out, like, who am I, you know, why am I the way that I am now, and why have I been doing the things I've been doing, and what have I been trying to prove? And they were the questions that I kept getting faced with in my life. And, you know, the fact that I couldn't dance, I even had to, that was probably the first layer of this all, was probably the first layer of falling, was saying, okay, well, I made this big dream at 18 years old that I wanted to be a dancer and move to LA and all the things. So what do I want to do now? And that was probably where I actually fell, because it was like I built this kind of like ivory tower of like false promises to myself, and this where success looked like and what success looked like. And what I know for sure is like the confidence that I had was really a glass house, because, you know, like when the pandemic came, it shattered everything that I had, and all of that external layer of who I was then broke, and then like almost like the demon emerged out of me for me to actually turn around and face it. You know, I was saying to someone earlier, it's like a Horcrux in Harry Potter, you know, like that dark energy just comes out. It was like, and it really was that. But my thing my whole life had been writing. Like I'd always journaled all the time. Like I wasn't like a prolific writer or anything, but I'd always have like journals where I'd just write down how I was feeling. And one of my aunts told me to do that when I was younger, and I used to pick it up and drop it throughout my life, but I've always kept journals. And I think just writing down how I felt allowed me to keep like sort of checking in with myself, even though it was surface layer. But I feel like that was my first point, was like, okay, let's start writing how I feel. And then in the pandemic, when we had nothing else to do, I started to write blogs about how I was feeling, what I was navigating through. And then people started to read them. And then that was kind of the first step into like, oh, people actually want to hear the reality of how I feel, not just this outer confidence thing that people think I have. So that was like the first level to it. And then I started to do some like energy healing and some breath work and getting really down and deep into the root of what this all was. And then I started to vlog it. So then that was kind of what I was doing on my Instagram, going live and stuff on there. So then that layer again of being really vulnerable and open, and people hearing, like, you know, so many people in my life didn't know my story. They just thought that I love dance, so I became a dancer. You know, they didn't know that I was battling all of that stuff throughout my life. And there's been so many other things, like even one of my best friends a couple of years ago, we went on holiday together, and I was just telling her about how my nan had cancer for the second time. She was 13. And we went on holiday to Greece. She had to get rushed into hospital while we were there. So then me and my sister had to like fend for ourselves for like a week in Greece because we had no adult with us, you know. There's like been so many layers of things like that where we've had to just grow up, you know. And even like my whole experience at uni, as I said, I've worked 4 different jobs to be able to financially support myself. And like, you know, there's been so many different things in my life. But what I know for sure is I watched struggle my whole life. And then my generational trauma had been struggle. You know, like my family had come from different parts of the world as slaves to the country that became their home, right? So there's all of these layers of generational trauma. And then on top of that, the addiction had been part of my family lineage for every single, like whether my mother line or my father line, it comes down that way. So, you know, everyone had followed this same narrative. And I just said, no, you know, like even becoming a dancer, that was the first kind of point of me doing what was different. And then choosing to heal, I think the moment that I did start to dive into this, the energy work behind all of this was massive. Like it was almost like, and this is super woo woo, but when I had my first energy clearing thing, she said to me, "You've got like lineage of ancestors like waiting for you to do this work." And it was so wonderful because it was like, oh, this is like the confirmation of what I needed to know that this was the right thing to do. Because otherwise you just feel like, why does this feel so hard? And my whole life has felt like that. I've always stopped and said, why does this feel so hard? And I'm like, no one else has done it. That's
What
why, you
type
know,
of
like, and
energy
I'm,
clearing did you do? Could you share that with our listeners, for anyone that's ever
yeah,
gone through this and feels like that could help?
absolutely. So like Reiki is like the kind of thing, yeah, that I started with, and she kind of like cleared out all my energy. And it was so funny because I said to her, "Was you standing by my arm?" She was like, "No." And I was like, well, what was that then? She went, "Oh, we call in all of your spirit team and all of that." And I was like, right. So at this time, I was kind of like trickling into astrology and all these things. And then since that, I kind of dived into spirituality deeper. And again, like my family heritage has so many links to like Buddhism and Hinduism and all these different things that I was like, oh, wow, like this energy stuff, energy work, and women in general, we are all connected to like this witchy energy for sure, right? When you give yourself the permission, trust me, you'll find it. And I feel like that was the door opening to all of these other like spiritual realms of connection. And, you know, through my own healing now, my own spiritual gifts have developed so much more that, you know, that's why intuitive healer is the second part of my title, because that's also something I have real deep access to when I work with my clients, which is so beautiful. But yeah, the real starting point of that was really just saying, okay, something needs to be addressed. And then I went into my my master's degree, because again, what do you do as a dancer? That's nothing to do. So I was like, right, I'm going to focus on female empowerment, and I'm going to look at how dance has acted as an intervention to support mental health and well-being. And then in those findings, I was coming up with lots of things. I coming up with girls in care. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. So I started reading their stories, and I was thinking, why have they gone into care for that? Like, why did they get put into care? Or I'd been through something similar. Why is this feeling like very on the nose? And then the term ACEs kept coming up, and it's adverse childhood experiences, and it's a test. And I thought, oh, do you know what? This has come up really like quite a few times now. So I'm just going to look it up online and take the test. And I scored 8 out of 10. It's not a test you want to score highly for, basically. It's basically saying that you've had adverse childhood experiences. So 8 out of 10. I was like, oh, okay. So
Aces.
yeah,
AC.
yeah, like ACE, because it's E, yeah. So then that kind of confirmed to me everything that I'd been feeling, everything that was hard was because I didn't have a normal childhood experience. So I didn't get to grow up as a little girl. I was parentalized, which means I stepped obviously into the role of parent. And obviously just all the things that came with, like I said, my story and what I went through. And I think that was for me the diagnosis of like why I was the way I was. So from that point on, that really gave me the permission to be like, right, I've been through this. I'm working through it this way. Let's start to share that even more. So then again, throughout these blogs and vlogs that I was doing, I was sharing more and more of my soul and my honesty. And then that was kind of the invitation that people were giving me to be like, oh, can you come in and talk to, this school about this? Or we're doing an event. I'd really like you to come in and just speak about what it is that you've done and what you do. And probably that 2022 year, I was still looking at how being a dancer and doing this work coexisted. And I did a lot of workshops around that. And then kind of last year, I felt like I needed to let go of the dance completely because I was still teaching at Pineapple at the time, still doing the odd bit of performing work because I enjoyed it. And then I kind of got to a point where I was like, this doesn't feel right to me anymore. So I then let go of the dance piece. Now, if I do dance now, it is just solely for fun and engagement, and I feel like I get to hold and facilitate these spaces. And then even in the workshops I deliver now, when dance is there, it's for a completely different purpose. But by the way, what I will say is that all of my students I've had over all of the years have always said to me, I'm not a normal dance teacher. Like I've always given so much more advice. Like the parents would always come up to me and say, you've given my child so much more than dance. She's so much more confidence now. And that was before I'd even embarked on my healing. So I feel like my whole life was gearing me into this space and I just was blissfully unaware. Like even friends that I'd given advice to like years ago said to me, you're supposed to be doing this because you told me this in like 2020. Not even 2020, like 2008, you told me this piece of advice and I've never forgot it. And I'm like, what? So my whole life, I feel like I've been subconsciously doing this work. And then finally, when I hit the pandemic and I was like, okay, this is kind of where I sit now, the universe kind of went, yeah, here you go, have this, have this, have this. And the opportunities kept coming as a result of just a really hard time, So I think that, when we say like to the right place at the right time, it's almost like you have to be the version of yourself in order to receive that next level of whatever that looks like. And I think more than anything, it's that authenticity to who you are and showing up in that space. I think when you realize you've got no longer have anything to prove, that's when the universe is like, okay, you're ready. The next thing comes.
I was going to say as well, like you've gone through so much in such a short space of your life that you're kind of so like, not that you have to prove anything, but you are so overqualified with wisdom to really actually help people. Some people learn or they go through all of their own, everyone goes through their own life traumas and experiences, and they don't have that, like you've lived through, I say 60 years or someone would experience, but in 30. I haven't hold you up.
Yeah. I'm 33 now.
So you have had what could have been a lifetime of experience for one individual, but it's been condensed. It's just so you can give this sort of lived
guidance to somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's beautiful that you have come full circle and like you knew this was your skill, this was your calling, and it was like seeping out of you every now and again in lots of different ways and giving you those good feelings, only for when you removed that block that you were trying to find, that you were that armor of finding acceptance from other people. Were you able to actually really fully be in it and just find yourself, by the sounds of things?
Like what made you go, oh, I'm going to take some alternative routes to my healing? Or people say alternative or woo-woo, because by the way, I would say like I love Reiki.
We love Reiki. Kinesiology,
like all of the like holistic versions of healing. And I remember just to share a story, I did have a Reiki session one time where I walked in. I had given blood that day and I didn't disclose that. But by the end of my Reiki session, they said, you've lost a lot of blood on the left side. And like I was completely covered up. I was like, how did she know? But you know, and it's like I fully believe in energy. But
and I think women are we're coming into our own, especially business owners. We're realizing that we can't, like, working in this masculine state is missing a huge part of our nature, and nature wins every time. Like nature will always trump
100%.
everything. And there's more women being like, okay, no, we need to address the spirituality. We need to address our holistic life.
But women are getting overwhelmed, frustrated, and trying to fit into that box actually serve us.
My mum, just like on a side note, used to call me bruja when I was being... bruja means witch.
Really? Yeah, witch. It means witch in Spanish, yeah.
It's the same in Filipino. I used to be confused and be like, why is this said in a negative tone? Because now, bruja, I'm like, thank you.
Yeah. Yes. You're like, don't you know it, Queen? No, I love that. I guess for me, I don't know what called me to actually, do you know what I remember? So this is really woo-woo now. I remember having a astrology reading, and it was Vedic astrology, and that was in 2021. And she said to me all of these things. So everything we're talking about now, she said to me, you're in your Saturn return. Things have been hard. Things are going to be hard before they're easy. She actually said to me, my life is going to be like Oprah. And I'm like, I can't wait for that part to happen. The Oprah part. I'm ready. Yeah. Just saying, universe, hey, I'm here. But yeah, I just feel like that was kind of like the opening. And she even said to me then, she was like, you've got real spiritual gifts and connections. It's been seeping in throughout my whole life. I've been aware of it. And yeah, just kind of like little things. Like my sister used to be able to have really clear audio, like super clear, when she was younger, and she got scared of it, so she switched it off. So I knew it's been in my lineage. And then one day, I think just after I'd had that reading, I sat on my bed and I was like, what am I doing? Like, what is my purpose? And then I just remember a really clear voice coming through saying, to inspire. And I was like, oh, okay. And I really sat with that, and I was like, And then I remember just Googling energy healing. I didn't know what I was doing, why I was doing it. I clicked on one person's thing because it felt cool to me. I rang her and I said, I don't know why I'm ringing you. I thought, I have no idea why I'm ringing you. And I just told her what had happened. I told her that I was in my like kind of healing space and then working through this. And then she stopped for a minute. She went, I don't know why you're ringing me either. And then she stopped and she went, I know why you're ringing me. And then she just started telling me all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, that's actually it. That's how I feel. So then when I turned up to her house, it was really funny. Like, she did my clearing and everything. And there was one point where she started to shake and like do something weird. And she went, when I was clearing your energy, she went, went back to a timeline where we first met. And she was like, and you were part of the Spanish Inquisition and I was an innocent person and you'd killed me. She went, so that's what the shaking was. And then when I sat up, I had like a pain in my back. And I was like, I've got like a pain in my shoulder. Like, what is that? And she went, oh, we're still in that timeline. And that was an arrow that I put in your back. And I was like, what? And then she just pulled it out, this like energetic arrow. And I was like, what the hell? So like for me, that was the clarity I needed. And then after that, for like weeks, I was having loads of dreams where like I was seeing arrows by the side of my bed and like waking up in the night and stuff, and it was there still. So then she really opened up this like whole bag of worms for me, and even down to, she was saying that I had like a vice around my neck, like something had been put there like energetically. So she undid it, and she said to me, you're supposed to speak in this lifetime. She went, you're supposed to tell your truth. That's a big part of your journey here in earth. She undid it. And then that going forward was when I started to do the vlogs, I think, more, because then I had that permission, obviously energetically. And from that, I went to visit her, I think probably about 4 times, and each time I went there it was for something different. And the first time she had to realign my chakras and my energy, and then the second and third and fourth time, I think the third and fourth time she did life regression, and then the second time she opened my heart space. There was like lots of little things that we were kind of doing energetically that were opening me up. But I've got this real thing, and I think it's the one line in Human Design where I seek knowledge. And when someone shows me how to do something once, I know how to do it myself. So then spiritually, I was tuning into myself and clearing my energy and clearing the space, opening up my own chakras, opening up, going down into my life regression, and not realizing that not everyone can do that. So I just thought if this was normal, I was like, oh, okay, I'll just go in myself. I'll go into the Akashic records and do, and then people are like, what? That you can do that? And I was like, yeah, can you not? They're like, no. I was like, oh, okay, well then maybe this is where the intuitive healer comes in. And then obviously working with my clients now and seeing how that plans out of them, I'm like, oh wow, this is really cool and amazing, and something that I think has been just dormant in me. And then obviously as a result of that, I have clear audio and stuff now that comes in. So yeah, just a real Pandora's box. But I think to your point on that feminine space, when we're living so masculinely and so armored up, our gifts can't flow and flourish. And that has been another healing journey for me. So not only healing from the trauma, the second layer of that was healing into the feminine, so the feminine feels safe. And now this space that I kind of, dance between is between the masculine and feminine in a really healthy way. And I allow them to have the space that they need. And I think that is part of the divine union, and I think that's where we all need to sit.
You know what's crazy is that I don't know if it's the same for other women, but like I have a young child, and it was having kids does change your life, and I know every mother I've ever talked to has said the same thing, but it was a permission personally for me to address how I lacked living in my feminine, like making decisions from my feminine side. And so I'm so grateful to have had my son, because he
was your like brick wall.
He
to
was my
make
brick
you
wall.
be feminine.
Yeah, he was. And I have been so like accepting of like, because I can work in a very masculine state, like a lot of the way I make decisions, and he was my permission to, just let go. And what I find that other women that I've talked to have said the same thing, but I know you don't have to have kids to be able to have that like realization. But for any of our mother audiences out there, I wonder if you've ever had that experience, then let me know if it's not just me.
My sister definitely had the same sort of thing. I think for my sister, it was another layer because obviously she was in an abusive relationship. But now we look back, both of her children have served a different purpose. And I don't know what your son's star sign is. Do you know?
My God, he's born in October, end of October.
End what date? So he is a Scorpio. So the purpose of the child, depending on the star sign, is the lesson to teach the mother. So it's to connect with your emotions.
He does.
To feel.
Yeah. I always say he's my biggest teacher in life.
Yeah. Well, my sister, her oldest is Scorpio, and then her youngest is an Aries. So Aries is all about how to be a leader. So it's to connect with her emotions and then how to lead. So it's just like another kind of layer of what you're saying there. It's like our children are also our teachers, not just our like.
Before we continue, here's a quick thought. Ever feel like there's just never enough time to focus on what really matters in your business? You don't have to do it all alone. As they say, a great team makes everything easier. That's why we've partnered with the Freedom Geek. Their talented Filipino VAs help us with tasks like admin and podcast editing, just like for this episode, giving us the freedom to focus on what really moves the needle. If you're looking to reclaim your time and to work smarter, then check out the Freedom Geek. All the details are in the show notes. Now let's get back to our conversation.
Yeah. I've definitely felt that. And it would be interesting. They bring out so many insecurities in yourself and like force you to constantly address brick walls in your life.
I think another brick wall that women face, if you haven't had kids or as well as having had kids, is just we have tried to exist like since we've had, we've been a big part of the workplace. We've been able to have our own businesses. We've been operating in such a masculine state for a long time now. And so many of us have reached burnout of being that way. And that's been the brick wall where we're experiencing, at least for me, that like you're just exhausted of having to think and be that way. And I've also very recently kind of accepted, especially with my partner who was very traditionally masculine, to just be allowed to relax and be feminine. And there's so much relief once you get to that point, after you've hit your brick wall, whatever it looks like for you, to accept your own nature.
I was going to say as well, we did discuss this on a different episode about how, especially as entrepreneurial women, we have always felt that we needed to be the main provider, even in a relationship. I've even admittedly done it with my husband. And when I gave myself permission to have a child because I was like, oh, I can't have a child because I don't have time. But when I finally gave that permission to myself, it was having to trust, which is crazy because like I'm married and I've been with my partner for such a long time, but I couldn't let go of that ego of wanting to be the one who financially supported. Because I couldn't just allow myself to go, no, let me just have the child and it's okay to slow down. I couldn't make the connection. And I feel like a lot of women, especially like millennials, at least from everyone I've talked to, don't feel like just because of the way that the workforce is, we feel so much pressure that we're not allowed, like it's like a bad thing to.
No, I completely agree with you. And I think that's been really my own journey as well in terms of, wanting to be the one to do it all, but equally people looking to me to be the one to do it. I think that's been something I've had to dance around. So I almost feel like I came out of my healing journey wanting to be really feminine and not have to do, and then realizing now that I have to do still, like there's like an element of me in what I've achieved in terms of my own healing, but also like pioneering this like flag of like, okay, this is the way now, that I have to own that space and take it up. But what's really beautiful is from that space of not having to prove it and just being it, that's where the feminine energy comes in. But we're always going to dance, I think, in between the two. And it's really okay to do that. But I think giving yourself more space in between everything is the key. I think I had that question today already that someone asked me, like, how do you manage like to fill your cup up? And I said, I just don't over bombard my diary anymore. My days look very spread out. I'm not going from one thing to the next, and I think if you can create space, that literally is like the gold dust, I think, that we are clenching onto. We're like, no, if I'm really busy, that means I'm successful. No, it means you're burnt out.
It's like your calendar, what your calendar looks like is a reflection of what your life looks like.
We had to unlearn this. Now we make a lot of space.
Yeah, and it means saying no to things. Like this week, I've been asked to do so many social things and I've had to say no, and I've had to be okay with saying no. Like, I love my friends deeply, but I only have so much energy I can give, and that's my priority.
That was going to be my next question, actually, because you've always been the person that people turn to. You've been the person offering support and guidance and having to wear the armor for everyone's emotions
for your whole life.
When you recognized that you didn't need to be or do those things anymore, how did you manage the reactions of other people who kept turning to you to be that for them?
Well, I had to be the bad guy, and I had to be okay with it, and I think what is like the one thing for me that I know for sure is how you feel about yourself is how you feel about everything. So I can't make myself less of a priority, because that means that everything else I do is less of a priority. For example, like I always say that if you don't love yourself, the love you're giving to everyone else and everything else is conditional. Whereas if you love yourself unconditionally and you're your first priority, everyone else benefits from that version of you. So I went from being burnt out and resentful, turning up to things for the sake of it because I said I would be there, to now saying, no, I don't have the energy. And then turning up, feeling so fulfilled that everything I do with that person, they're like, oh my God, this is the best experience ever, rather than just being there for the sake of it, So I think that's been the real full circle there. But yeah, I had to let go of a few people. A lot of friends left. I had to say goodbye. I had to cut a few people out because my peace and my happiness had to be my priority, because I know that the people that do love me for all of me want to see me win, succeed, and be happy. And the ones that don't were benefiting off of that old version of me. And I always say that a lot of times in my life, people like me better broken. Yeah. And I've had to accept that narrative. But in turn, the people that have come in as a result of me making the space have been so much more soul aligned, connected, like instantly getting it and understanding me. And that's been something I really battled with my whole life, is I didn't feel like anyone understood me. So now, because I understand myself so deeply, I'm meeting people that do get it. And that's just really beautiful. And I feel like everyone deserves to be there.
I love that. It's like you just filtered out who it just realigned your circle of people, attracted who was meant to be in there for you to have, well, it seems quite clearly, your own well-being first. relaxed and like a calmer nervous system, which will benefit from.
Yeah, and something I'm practicing, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not like an overnight healed thing, you know, like I'm regularly regulating my nervous system. Like every night I'm doing somatic work and meditation and journaling. Like don't think that this is all you won, you're healed, you know, it's not that.
Ongoing thing, just like your physical health, your
Absolutely.
mental health, your soul health is an ongoing practice. We like to wrap up this episode with
A question.
a question. So just finish the sentence. It's honestly, my biggest lesson is
Quite a lot.
it doesn't have to. It could be about literally anything. And
Life,
it's not your last words. We can we can always do another episode.
So my biggest lesson is you can't sacrifice who you are to please or to be anything else anyone wants you to be. You have to love you first, and in turn that's when everything else comes as a result.
I love that.
And then it flows.
It really does. And I feel like again, to kind of go back off of that mask sort of question that we spoke about at the beginning, is that I always say now, like, you are the only you there is, and that's your superpower. So stop trying to do it like everyone else. Stop trying to do it like the men do. Stop trying to be successful because your mum wanted a doctor or a lawyer and you've got to prove yourself now that you're not that. You know, it's like, actually do you to the best of your ability, and everything else will flow as a result of that. But you have to give yourself that permission first, because no one's coming to do it for you.
Amazing. I love that. So could you share what your offerings are to our audience?
Yeah, so I have now decided that I'm going to be working with women in one-to-one settings, which I always do, but for 6 months or 12 months because of this journey space. So if anyone listening that's really resonating with my story and feels like something isn't right, or you're feeling empty or hollow, or that something, you know, needs to be addressed, drop me a DM, because, you know, this is all of my work now. It's taken women on the journey of self-discovery all the way to that deep-rooted, authentic empowerment, you know, through all of the layers. And if you're not ready quite for that journey, I do have a self-study available that's on my website, and it's a series of videos to get you through, again, me talking, just cheering you on. And then also I have a journal. And for the girls in schools, so if you're a teacher, I do have a program called Permission to Shine that I teach in secondary schools. And it's, again, giving girls these tools to be able to navigate life and just, go forward, I think, knowing what we wish we knew then, right? So, yeah, and also corporate events and workshops, things like that. If you work in a workplace environment where you're like, yeah, we definitely need some female empowerment vibes, I'm your gal. Drop me a message.
Sherisse is your girl. Where can everyone find? I guess you've sent us the links. They can also find you on Instagram, can't they?
Yeah. Sherisse _Bisram on all the platforms, and SherisseBisram.com.
Amazing. Oh, love your website as well, by the way. So we'll put that all in the show notes so you can go find Sherisse. I highly recommend, if you are finding obstacles in your life, it's more often than not, everything starts with your mindset and your personal development in order for you to get anywhere else. So start there. And if you need help, Sherisse is your lady.
Thank you, Sherisse.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
No, I've loved it. Bye.